David Carradine's name is familiar to multiple generations, but not always for the same reasons. Some think instantly of the quiet, soft-voiced Shaolin monk he portrayed on the 1970s TV series Kung Fu. Others recall his turn as the sinister Bill in Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill, the calm warrior exuding a sense of danger and philosophical depth. Yet behind those screen personas was a man shaped by an artistic family, bohemian ideals, and a streak of wanderlust that led him to crave spaces where he could vanish from the world. If you know anything about David, you know he came from Hollywood royalty. His father, John Carradine, was a prolific character actor with a distinguished voice and a penchant for the dramatic. David inherited much of his father's theatrical flair, but also carried a longing for peace, an ironic contradiction for someone whose life was so deeply entwined with Kung Fu and all its philosophical demands for self-awareness and tranquility. In each chapter of David's life, the homes he chose, altered, and sometimes hastily left behind, became as telling as any autobiography. Early on, he lived in modest apartments while building his career, revealing a restless streak that had him constantly in search of personal authenticity. Later, he acquired a ranch-style estate that many whispered was less about comfort and more about building an enclave where he could commune with nature and old friends. But it was his final rumored to be abandoned home in the Hollywood Hills that truly captured his spirit. A place that combined Eastern influences, Southwestern desert touches, and a dash of old Hollywood opulence in a way only David Carradine could conceive. A friend once said, he wasn't just an actor, he was a gypsy philosopher. Maybe that's the best place to start in understanding why his last house looked more like an eclectic museum of martial arts, spiritual iconography, and bohemian relics than a typical star's mansion. Step inside this once grand estate, and you might detect an almost magnetic hush. Even now, the living room walls, mottled with dust and the faint outlines of where paintings once hung, exude an energy that's part memory and part enchantment. It takes a moment, but you begin to see how each archway, each decorative panel, and each piece of furniture had a story to tell about the man who called this place home for a time. He was born in Hollywood to a father who was both revered and at times misunderstood, which meant David's early life was nomadic. For stints, he'd live in small homes in Los Angeles, then uproot for a while to New York, following his father's career moves or his own inclinations to escape. Perhaps that zigzagging taught him the art of living lightly in any space, but it also fanned his fascination with building a place that truly felt like a sanctuary. Yet David's sanctuary was seldom about glitz and glam. Even at the height of his fame in the 1970s, he chose a ranch in the outskirts of Malibu that had a notoriously haphazard interior, a mismatch of worn rugs, mismatched furniture, and Chinese calligraphy. He'd say, "Comfort is in the soul, not the couch." And that phrase became a kind of code for how he approached interior design. Yet for this final home in the hills, the story takes a different turn. It wasn't just about comfort, it was about symbolism. Visitors in those early days described it as a place where East met West in a swirl of incense smoke, worn floorboards, and hidden nooks. Entering that house, you'd pass through a tall iron gate that looked straight out of a medieval European estate, spiked tips, ornamental detailing, before you arrived at an unassuming wooden front door with a Chinese guardian lion door knocker. Those who came for dinner were greeted with a single chime that echoed in a foyer lined with black and white calligraphy scrolls. The arrangement was minimal, but the ambiance was hauntingly serene. The foyer opened up into a sprawling living room encased by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city below. At night, the lights of Los Angeles shimmered in the distance, like tiny jewels scattered across a dark velvet cloth, lending the space an otherworldly feel. By day, the sun would pour in with an almost harsh intensity, highlighting the woven tapestry rugs David had collected from markets in Morocco and from street vendors in Hong Kong. Right in the center of that living room was a low-slung coffee table, hand-carved teak with decorative inlays of mother of pearl. Perched atop were books about Zen philosophy, martial arts treatises, and the occasional battered script. Contradictions abounded here. You might spot a small statue of the Buddha next to a half-empty bottle of whiskey, or a worn-out meditation cushion propped against a sword display stand. It was as if two worlds, Hollywood's glitz and ancient Eastern wisdom, met and struck a precarious balance, one that only David could truly navigate. His martial arts training had become a cornerstone of his identity after Kung Fu aired, and he was known to practice daily. That dedication found a literal home in the property's sunroom, which David converted into a private dojo. The floor was red oak, polished to a mirrored sheen, enclosed by sliding shoji screens painted with lotus flowers. He'd often start each morning here practicing Tai Chi forms, while a wooden incense holder let out slender streams of frankincense. People who watched from the periphery said it was mesmerizing to see him move, his limbs fluid as water, his face focused, occasionally broken by a half-smile as if recalling a memory. It was in this sunlit dojo that he wrestled with the Hollywood demands on his soul, pushing his body to find calm in movement, searching for meaning in the quiet. He'd sometimes entertain guests, stepping from a slow, graceful kata into a casual conversation about an upcoming film role. The effect was intimate and disconcerting, like peeking behind the curtain at a wizard's workshop. A corridor branching off from the dojo led to what might be described as David's library, though it was more accurately a chaotic private archive. Shelves extended from floor to ceiling, jammed with worn paperbacks, antique scrolls, martial arts manuals, scripts he'd starred in or hoped to star in, diaries from production shoots, and random scribbles he'd jotted down at 3 a.m. The smell of old paper and aged leather bindings hung in the air, giving the room the feel of a centuries-old study. One shelf was dedicated exclusively to works of Eastern philosophy, Lao Tzu, Confucius, The Art of War. Another shelf was a tribute to Western culture, ranging from Shakespeare's complete works to contemporary American poetry. Dispersed among these shelves were personal photo albums, snapshots from decades spent in film. David smiling wide with an unlit cigar while chatting with John Wayne, David on set with his father in a rare cameo, David practicing sword choreography with a young Uma Thurman. Each photo felt like a secret portal into a man who lived many lives all at once. Wander further down the hallway, and you'd find bedrooms that, to outside eyes, seemed haphazard in style. One was adorned in bright southwestern patterns, reminiscent of a New Mexico adobe. A clay chimney stood in the corner, cracked with soot marks from nights spent reading under a flickering firelight. Another bedroom, the rumored master suite, was draped in dark velvet curtains with Chinese lanterns hanging in the corners, casting soft, diffuse glows across the lacquered furniture. The bed was an intricate canopy design, ringed by a swirl of red fabric that gave the room a theatrical sense, part stage set, part Eastern hideaway. At the foot of the bed stood a carved chest rumored to hold some of David's more esoteric scripts, half-finished letters, and martial arts journals filled with sketches of weapon forms. Friends who spent time here spoke of late-night conversations that drifted from the meaning of life to the next day's filming call time, a constant interplay of the profound and the mundane. One peculiar feature that guests sometimes joked about was the labyrinthine network of secret passages. Whether they were truly secret is debatable. Some might have been plain storage areas or narrow service corridors left over from the property's older blueprint. But David liked to spin fantastical tales, describing them as hidden monks' passages or smugglers' routes. In reality, the estate was initially built in the 1920s by a silent film director who valued privacy and who had indeed designed a few concealed hallways for discreet entertaining. David stumbled upon them while renovating and turned them into personal hideaways where he could paint, meditate, or just escape the demands of a high-profile life. Over time, he set up small shrines or altars in these passages, candles, incense, a jade Buddha statue, sometimes even a photograph of his father or older family members. Mysterious remnants of these spaces remain even now, with half-burnt candles and old footprints in the dust, giving the abandoned property a distinctly spiritual aura. To understand why David ended up in such a place, you have to rewind to the early days of his career. He was a restless soul from the start. In the 1960s, fresh out of a stint in the Army, he flitted around small apartments in Los Angeles while taking acting classes and paying his dues in theater. It was a time of communal living, creative experiments, and boundary-pushing lifestyles. He was never content with mainstream design or standard living arrangements. One friend recalled visiting David at a cramped West Hollywood apartment and finding the entire main room stripped of furniture except for a single futon and a scattering of calligraphy practice sheets on the floor. If David had to choose between a comfortable living room set and a chance to express himself, he'd choose expression every time. When Kung Fu catapulted him to stardom in 1972, fans might have expected him to adopt a sleek Hollywood Hills mansion in the standard style of that era: white leather couches, large abstract art, panoramic windows showcasing the city. Instead, David gravitated toward an old ranch on the outskirts of Malibu, where he could cultivate the land and exist somewhat off-grid. That place, known informally among friends as the Kung Fu Ranch, was a curious blend of ramshackle comfort and spiritual motifs. He installed a makeshift Zen garden, scattering stones and raking patterns in the dirt. He built a small wooden shack out back to practice martial arts, and on weekends, you might find half of the cast of Kung Fu or various musician friends jamming on the porch. Stories abound of David disappearing for days on end into the nearby hills, forging an almost mystical connection with nature, then returning to regale guests with philosophical musings. However, that ranch was never meant to be permanent. It was more an antidote to the demands of sudden fame. Eventually, changing needs, restless energy, and new career opportunities drew him away. He sold the ranch in a flurry. Rumor was he left behind a storeroom of random swords, costumes, and stacks of letters from fans. Then came his years of global wandering. The man was unstoppable in his curiosity. He'd film in Asia, then stay on after production to explore temples and martial arts schools. He'd bring back artifacts, silk paintings, odd pieces of wooden sculptures, tattered calligraphy handbooks. He absorbed philosophies from each region, letting them shape his worldview. By the time the late 1990s rolled around, David's personal style was a mosaic of all these influences, and he looked for a home that could accommodate his evolving tastes. That's when the Hollywood Hills property caught his eye. Initially built in the silent film era, it had a reputation for eccentric design. A Spanish Revival facade with Moorish arches gave way to interior spaces influenced by the Art Deco trends of the 1930s. Add in renovations from later owners who dabbled in mid-century modern touches, and you had an architectural Frankenstein's monster, part romance, part practicality, part whimsical experiment. David, of course, saw potential. He famously told a friend, "I'm going to make it mine, from the basement up. No more half measures." He enlisted a handful of craftsmen, some well regarded, some off the beaten path, along with a circle of close friends, many of them martial artists or spiritual seekers themselves. Over the next few years, that place became a kaleidoscope of styles. Traditional Spanish tile floors were interspersed with open zen spaces featuring tatami mats. Exposed wooden beams in the living room were lined with engraved Chinese dragons. A southwestern-style adobe fireplace sat adjacent to an ornate tea ceremony alcove. To outsiders, it might have looked chaotic, but to David, it was the perfect external expression of his internal world, multi-layered, ever-transforming. His father's dramatic spirit also lingered in the decorative choices. One rumor claims that David had a secret room dedicated to old family memorabilia, vintage costumes, film posters, even audio reels of John Carradine's readings of Shakespeare. Whether that's true or not, the house crackled with an undeniable theatrical energy. For a while, it served as a hub of creativity. David would host small gatherings in the courtyard, which featured a modest koi pond ringed by stepping stones. Soft lantern light hung from the trees, illuminating the night as guests sipped tea or wine, sharing stories of the business. Unlike the usual Hollywood parties with blaring music and paparazzi at every corner, David's soirees were quiet, intimate affairs. He insisted that guests remove their shoes before stepping onto the courtyard's stone floor, a sign of respect he'd picked up from his years in Asia. Conversation ranged from the intricacies of film direction to the best methods of practicing breath control during meditation. Many attendees marveled at the sense of calm that overtook them in that space, a calm they rarely felt in Hollywood's relentless hustle. Yet behind the curated peacefulness, David carried the weight of personal struggles. He battled addiction at various points in his life, had multiple marriages and divorces, and often felt the glare of celebrity overshadowing his desire for privacy. Rumors swirled that he'd sometimes retreat into the hidden corridors of the house for days, leaving only to pick at leftover takeout in the kitchen or do a quick round of martial arts in the dojo. Those who dared to ring the doorbell unannounced might find the place eerily quiet. This self-imposed solitude, far from being lonely or strange to David, was essential, a sacred practice. "I need to vanish sometimes," he confided to a friend. "It's the only way I can hear my own thoughts." As the 2000s arrived and new roles beckoned, none more high-profile than Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill, the property became both a creative workshop and a restful haven for David. He prepared for the role of Bill here, practicing katas in the sunroom, reciting lines in the library, and refining the calm, menacing presence that made his performance so unforgettable. After those intense filming schedules, returning home felt like an exhale. He'd slip off his shoes at the threshold, sink onto a floor cushion, and let the house envelop him in its hush. More than once, he mentioned that the property felt alive. He believed spaces could hold energy, both good and bad, and he worked constantly to maintain a sense of balance, burning sage or lighting candles if he sensed negativity creeping in. Sometimes a close friend or spiritual advisor would come by to do a more formal cleansing, carrying a bowl of salt water through the corridors, chanting softly. Whatever one believes about these rituals, the effect was real for David. They helped him keep an internal equilibrium in a profession that often devours the soul, but life's chapters inevitably shift. In 2009, the world lost David Carradine under circumstances that remain clouded in speculation and controversy. His death, occurring in Bangkok while filming, cast a tragic pall over his Hollywood legacy. Suddenly, this final house of his, once a place of vibrant gatherings and hushed introspection, was locked up, overshadowed by legal tangles, estate matters, and swirling rumors. Some say it briefly passed into the hands of a relative. Others say it was seized or fell into financial disrepair. What's certain is that the home was never truly returned to its previous life of meditation sessions and intimate courtyard dinners. Over time, it came to be seen as abandoned, or at least neglected, a place of dust and echoes, a shell that once contained David's powerful presence. It's hard to imagine now, stepping through the front door, that this was once a sanctuary. The tile floors are cracked and chipped. The koi pond is long dried, its fish relocated. Where soft lanterns once bathed the courtyard in a calming glow, you might find broken bulbs, rusted stands. The sunroom dojo, its walls once bright with daylight, stands hollow, with peeling paint and water stains from a leaky roof. That polished red oak floor is warped and discolored, as though nature has begun reclaiming it. The library, too, no longer smells of old leather and incense. It reeks of age and mildew. Many of the books are gone or scattered, leaving empty shelves that show outlines of dust where volumes once stood. A few battered manuscripts still remain, their pages fused together from moisture, revealing only glimpses of the secrets they once contained. Amid the disarray, you'll still find traces of David's spirit. A single calligraphy brush left behind, half an incense stick snapped off in a small porcelain dish, a sun-bleached photograph of him with a subtle grin, the corners curling in on themselves. In the master suite, that old canopy bed frame remains, minus the red velvet drapings, which presumably were removed or rotted over time. The carved chest at the foot stands open, empty except for a lone slip of paper with scribbled lines, no beginning, no end. The room feels undone, as though it's holding its breath for someone to come back and complete a ritual. A thick layer of dust has turned the once glossy floors into a hazy mirror that echoes passing footsteps. Outside, the courtyard stone floor is littered with dead leaves. The fountain that once trickled quietly, now a silent block of cracked cement. Sometimes, local explorers or real estate agents curious about the property step inside, half expecting to meet a Hollywood caretaker or rummaging fan. They find only silence. But there's still that intangible hum, the sense that these walls sheltered profound creativity and haunting introspection. Some claim they hear distant flute music or the faint shuffle of footsteps. Others dismiss these experiences as tricks of the wind or the imagination. But the feeling persists that David's energy, his search for meaning, his restless creativity, lingers in every corner. If we consider how deeply this house mirrored him, we might see that it was always destined to be something more than a trophy property. David was a man of contradictions, a philosopher whose career thrived on action roles, a Hollywood star who nurtured a deep need for solitude, a martial artist who fought many internal battles, and an actor carrying a storied family legacy. The house embodied those contradictions in its architecture, decor, and labyrinthine passages. It served as both a stage for intimate gatherings and a place to hide from the spotlight, both a reflection of Eastern serenity and a nod to old Hollywood grandeur. Had David lived on and found another place, he might have left this home behind much like the Malibu Ranch, with a sudden decision spurred by new insights or shifting energy. But that never happened. Instead, the property remained suspended in time, a silent witness to a life that ended abruptly and left so many questions. One might compare it to a grand set after the show has wrapped, props scattered, the audience gone, but the resonance of performances still echoing in the wings. Like David himself, The house never fully conformed to a single label or identity. Instead, it stands as a fluid tapestry of memory, artistry, and the unknowable complexities of its owner. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.